Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And what began with the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn being filmed sitting on the floor of a train complaining about overcrowding has turned into a dispute with Virgin Trains about whether seats were actually available. The Labour leader was travelling from London to Newcastle earlier this month. Now Virgin has released CCTV footage appearing to contradict Mr Corbyn's story. Our political correspondent Ben Wright reports.
Crouching on the floor of a Virgin train, this was Jeremy Corbyn's claim.
Today this train is completely ram-packed. The staff on the train are absolutely brilliant, working really hard to help everybody. The reality is there's not enough trains, we need more of them, and they're also incredibly expensive. Isn't that a good case for public ownership?
The video was recorded on the 11 a.m. departure from London to Newcastle on August the 11th. Days later, Mr Corbyn's filmed corridor complaint was released. But now Virgin Trains has hit back, releasing CCTV pictures the company says shows there were seats available. According to Virgin Trains, 7 minutes into the journey, Jeremy Corbyn walked past several unreserved seats in Coach H. He also walked past a number of reserved but empty seats a minute later. Then at 11:43, Mr Corbyn returned to Coach H with the help of onboard crew and took a seat. But according to the company, that was after he had walked to the end of the train, sat on the floor and recorded his video. In a statement from Virgin Trains tweeted by Richard Branson, the company said, "We have to take issue with the idea that Mr Corbyn wasn't able to be seated on the service, as this clearly wasn't the case. We'd encourage Jeremy to book ahead next time he travels with us." The company said it knows it can be hard to find seats on its east and west coast services, and Jeremy Corbyn is not the first commuter to complain of overcrowding. But it's the suggestion of deception to make a political point that could be damaging. Jeremy Corbyn, champion of a nationalised railway, is being taken to task by a private train operator. But Mr Corbyn's team insist it's Virgin Trains who've got this wrong, and that when they first boarded the train there were no free unreserved seats available. So they, like other passengers, had to wait for some to become free. This was, they said, a ram-packed train.
What you can't see on the images necessarily is the fact that there was luggage reserving the seats, or small children who you might not be able to see over the back of the seat that were sitting there. There's simply, I was there was simply no seats available on the train. That's why Jeremy sat on the floor for the first part of the journey.
Mr Corbyn's leadership rival Owen Smith tried to make mileage out of this train row, saying his own campaign remained on track. Ben Wright, BBC News, Westminster.
Now, it's already been called TrainGate. Jeremy Corbyn was filmed earlier this month sitting in the corridor of a Virgin train service from London to Newcastle, claiming that he could not get a seat on the ram-packed train and calling for renationalisation of trains. But Virgin today issued a statement backed by images from CCTV footage saying that Mr Corbyn had walked past empty, unreserved seats before filming his comments. He was eventually shown to a seat by a member of staff. Mr Corbyn's holding a leadership rally in East London tonight, and Kieran Jenkins is there. So, what did you have to say, Kieran?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn hasn't actually arrived here yet. If he does, we'll obviously try and bring him to you. But you might think we're bonkers even for discussing this. Did Jeremy Corbyn sit on the floor of a train when he could have had a seat? Well, there's a smidgen of a bigger picture, and that is that when those images were released, it was rather good PR for Mr Corbyn, the sort of PR that attracts crowds in their droves to events like this. So Jeremy Corbyn is an almost saintly figure with integrity and authenticity that other politicians simply don't have. Now, if that were to be undermined, well, of course, it's a big deal. The problem is, it's not nearly that clear-cut.
This is a problem that many passengers face every day on the trains, commuters and long-distance travellers. Today this train is completely ram-packed.
Here's Jeremy Corbyn sat on the floor just like the rest of us. Not PR, but further proof, said his supporters, of his authenticity, Jeremy being Jeremy. Or was it? Virgin Trains have images of that journey too. CCTV of the 11 a.m. from London to Newcastle, August 11th. They say at 11:07, Jeremy Corbyn walked past empty, unreserved seats in Coach H. A minute later, he passed empty but reserved seats in Coach F. Virgin Trains claim it was then that he filmed that notorious video.
The reality is there's not enough trains, we need more of them, and they're also incredibly expensive. Isn't that a good case for public ownership?
In all, just 35 minutes passed before Jeremy Corbyn returned to the unreserved, empty seats in Coach H and, says Virgin Trains, sat down with more than 2 hours of his journey remaining. In response, this video was shared this afternoon by the Corbyn supporting writer, producer, rapper who was with him. Charles B. Anthony has been elaborating on his original Guardian article which broke the story. He tweeted that Mr. Corbyn sat down after people got off the train. Well, here's video, says Virgin Trains, of Mr. Corbyn taking a seat before the train made a single stop. Mr. Corbyn was heading that day to the Labour leadership hustings in Gateshead. With him on that journey was an activist who his team have suggested we speak to.
And we walked through the carriage, through every carriage on the train, and there were no seats available. So what might not be clear from the CCTV footage is that there was children sitting on some of the seats, so you might not be able to see their heads above the top of the seats, or luggage that was reserving the seats for other people. There was simply nowhere for us to sit.
Mr. Corbyn certainly sat on the floor. Other passengers sat with him. They too observed a busy service. An embarrassment? Maybe. Does it matter? Maybe not. Corbyn's campaign is probably still on track.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn has now entered the building. He had nothing to say about TrainGate. So is this a problem for him? Well, yes, in the sense that it's another chaotic episode in an already chaotic leadership contest. No, his supporters would say in the sense that this is a politician riding standard class among the people who vote for him. What's the big deal?
Kieran, thanks very much.
Now, as a check of the parliamentary record Hansard reveals, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn once complained about poor CCTV systems on London's transport network. Well, he might not be doing that again anytime soon, because it looks as though one such camera might have rather caught him out. 2 weeks ago, he released a video of himself sitting on the floor of a train to highlight overcrowding, except the train company has been looking through the on-board CCTV, and there he is, only moments before walking past what looks suspiciously like empty seats. His staff insist they were occupied.
Jeremy Corbyn's no fan of privatised railways, and when he caught this train to Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, every packed seat certainly helped make his point. The only question is whether he knew all this was stretching it a little too far.
Today this train is completely ram-packed. The staff on the train are absolutely brilliant, working really hard to help everybody. The reality is there's not enough trains, we need more of them.
Sitting on the floor between carriages looked great on camera, but turns out there was less convenient footage too. Today Virgin Trains released this CCTV, which implies the floor wasn't the only space available, as a short while later Mr. Corbyn finds the comfort of a seat. When he got on the train here in London, the footage suggests Jeremy Corbyn walked straight through several carriages with empty spaces, making his way right to the back of the train to film his video. Then, 15 minutes later, and job done, he returned to Coach H to take a seat. Arriving via a different mode of transport tonight for a rally in London, Jeremy Corbyn wasn't answering questions.
Lovely to see you all. Thanks for coming along tonight. Thank you very much for coming tonight. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
But his team say he only found a seat after a family was upgraded to first class, though earlier CCTV does appear to show him walking past empty spaces.
I think what's unclear in the CCTV footage is that there was either luggage or possibly children sitting on all of those seats, so there simply weren't any seats available. I was there travelling with Jeremy.
So why do you think Virgin Trains have released this CCTV image then if it's not actually representative of what happened?
I mean, that is a very good question. On the second day after the ballots for the Labour leadership election went out yesterday, lots of people are voting today, and it seems curious to me that Richard Branson and Virgin Trains, obviously, who are opposed to Jeremy's policy on public ownership of the railways, have chosen today to kind of present this skewed version of events.
But Virgin Trains say we have to take issue with the idea that Mr Corbyn wasn't able to be seated on the service, as this clearly wasn't the case. We'd encourage Jeremy to book ahead next time he travels with us, both to reserve a seat and to ensure he gets our lowest fares. But Jeremy Corbyn may be paying for last week's seat for a little while longer. If he thought sitting in the aisle was bad enough, stretching the point hardly makes him look any more dignified.
And Paul is here with me now. Paul, there's kind of no in-between with this. I mean, either Virgin are being a bit disingenuous at best, or Jeremy Corbyn is. You've seen all the pictures, you've watched it all day. What's your assessment of this story?
I think, if anything here, we're looking at a case of exaggeration rather than sort of fabrication, Tom. If you look at the CCTV footage and the other images that we've got too, it's clear that this was a very busy train. We know that overcrowding can be a problem on our trains. We don't need Jeremy Corbyn to tell us that, really. But I think we could ask whether he chose the most advantageous position on this train to take this video, though there were other people sitting on the floor with him. You've got to ask, though, whether this really makes any difference here. I mean, his opponents say, yeah, this questions his integrity, you know, he's a man who promised honest politics, but actually, a lot of his supporters already feel his integrity is unquestionable anyway, and the fact that he's taking on a big private company like Virgin Trains, for them, will just be an extra bonus, really. In fact, tomorrow he's railing against privatisation again in the NHS. So I think ultimately, whether you believe Jeremy Corbyn or Virgin Trains here will largely come down to the kind of judgments you made about Jeremy Corbyn long before he took that 10 o'clock to Newcastle.
OK, Paul, that's very clear. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, it didn't take long for Twitter to call it TrainGate, a case of alleged mendacity on the East Coast line. It started last week with Jeremy Corbyn recording some footage about the state of the railways, sitting on the floor of a train, calling it ram-packed. The implication was that there were no available seats. Well, Virgin, whose train it was, decided to declare war on the Corbyn machine today, releasing CCTV images of apparently empty seats on that train, and indeed showing us that Mr Corbyn went to sit in one after he had recorded his clip on the floor. Now, in TV land, we know that sometimes the thing you want to film, like a ram-packed train, isn't there when you are. And we normally find carefully constructed weasel words to get round that without actually lying. We'd say things like, trains like this are ram-packed day in and day out, or often you can't even get a seat on a train and have to sit on the floor. But Mr Corbyn left himself less wiggle room. He said, today this train is completely ram-packed. Now, he's meant to be untainted by the dark arts of spin, so was it ram-packed or merely crowded? And does it even matter? Here's Chris Cook.
Something that Jeremy Corbyn's fans love about him is his everyman political persona. Indeed, a few weeks ago, he made a viral video about being the victim of an all-too-common problem.
Today, this train is completely ram-packed. The staff on the train are absolutely brilliant, working really hard to help everybody. The reality is there's not enough trains, we need more of them, and they're also incredibly expensive.
Today, though, Virgin Trains, which runs that service, released CCTV footage, and it shows him walking past empty seats before he recorded that video, then settling down in a seat after he was done. Virgin Trains said,
"We have to take issue with the idea that Mr Corbyn wasn't able to be seated on the service, as this clearly wasn't the case. We'd encourage Jeremy to book ahead next time he travels with us."
Mr Corbyn's team absolutely deny this chain of events. This staff member was there.
We walked through all of the carriages on the train and there weren't any seats available. So either people were sitting in the seats or they were reserved, or there was, luggage in the seats, reserving them for other people. Walked all the way through the train and ended up having to sit on the floor at the far end of the train. There were other passengers that were also sitting on the floor because they weren't able to get seats either. I think after about 45 minutes we were able to, very friendly train guard came to tell us that some seats had become available. As I understand, a family were moved into, they had upgraded into the first class section of the train, and therefore the seats were offered to Jeremy. We were all very grateful for them.
But here's the problem. This footage is of Mr Corbyn shortly into the journey, from before he recorded the video. Virgin say those seats are empty and they're unreserved. How to explain that?
There appear to be lots of empty, unreserved seats in that photo, and that's right at the beginning of the journey. That's 10 minutes in.
Yeah. No, so we walked through, and I think what isn't clear in the photo is the fact that there are people sitting on the seats, or children sitting on the seats, or luggage on the seats. I mean, there's simply, as we walked through all of the carriages, there weren't any places for us to sit down on.
You may ask whether this sort of thing is really important, but it's important to remember that, sadly, most people in Britain aren't Newsnight viewers. Most voters aren't that interested in the minutiae of policy discussions here in Westminster. A simple story that speaks to the character of senior politicians, one that really gets cut through, can therefore be surprisingly important.
Michael Foot's so-called donkey jacket, worn at the cenotaph, was of no real importance, but people with concerns about his patriotism saw it as a signal. 10 years ago, the discovery that David Cameron cycled to work, followed by a chauffeur carrying his stuff, got amazing cut-through because it spoke to concerns he might be a bit too smooth. Might the Virgin Trains video saga be Mr Corbyn's version of those? Does it speak strongly to his weaknesses?
While Jeremy Corbyn is certainly trusted among his supporters, among the general public that level of trust is not nearly as high. And so an event such as this, where his honesty is called into question, certainly could have an impact. My suspicion is, though, that the timing means that among his supporters this will be seen as yet another attack, and among the general public they probably won't pay too much attention.
So, will it matter? Well, Mr Corbyn's team is sensitive about the timing of this release.
It does seem strange that the timing of Richard Branson and Virgin to release these images that kind of present a slightly skewed version of events that they've chosen now as the ballot papers are going out.
Mr Corbyn is still likely to retain the leadership.
Lovely to see you all.
Rather appropriately, his supporters point to a lack of empty seats at rallies as a measure of his support.
Chris Cook there, joining me now, Matt Larser, former broadcast media advisor to Ed Miliband, now director of the think tank Policy Network, and Deborah Mattinson, who used to be a pollster for Gordon Brown and now runs Britain Thinks. OK, first, just what do you think the truth is here? They say those seats had clothes in, children in. Do you believe it? Or
you know, you can see the photographs. They are there to see. I mean, unless Virgin has actually issued photographs and then somehow superimposed Jeremy Corbyn on that carriage. They could be teeny-weeny little people. No, that's true. They could. Very, very small people that we couldn't see. I think that this is a difficult one to talk your way out of, quite honestly. And you need a better witness than somebody who's actually a member of his staff,
Absolutely.
I think.
I think conspiracy theories, which the Corbyn camp are not entirely unfamiliar with, won't be able to explain those pictures away.
Right. OK, so now, does it matter? Is it a foot in his Michael Foot in his coat, or a Cameron and the car behind him?
I think it's more like the Cameron car, you know, TrainerGate rather than TrainGate, where his shoes were in the limo. I mean, that, you know, I remember that vividly. You know, the incident happened in focus groups months afterwards. People talked about it and it had struck a chord. The reason being that David Cameron had very, very carefully positioned himself as an eco-warrior, and then suddenly doing this, and you know, the story unravelling, just unpicked that positioning.
And it was a simple enough story. Everybody got it. You didn't have to know about
you didn't, yes.
policy.
And really, really, months later, they still talked about it. I think this one may just be the same. You know, this is the man who's talked straight, talking, honest politics. He's put himself above all of those, you know, tacky photo opportunities and media games, and yet here he is, manifestly playing it.
Neither of you are Corbyn fans, I don't think, in particular.
No,
but I mean, I could see you nodding there enthusiastically. But
I think why it does matter is that, and as Chris said in the package, die-hard Corbynistas are going to regard this as just another part of the mainstream media attack on him, which, you know, you explored last night. I mean, we're going to find out by tomorrow exactly which former Blairites work for whichever PR agency Virgin use. You know, that will be where the story will go. But to the wider public, whatever happens in the leadership election, this does matter. You know, he's trying to be prolier than thou. He's trying to, you know, and that doesn't. Michael Meacher, the late Michael Meacher, once got caught out trying to say that, you know, he was a horny-handed son of toil. It turned out it had some dozen houses, and he lost the liable action against the Observer. The only thing everybody ever remembered about Michael Meacher was how many houses he had, and he wasn't actually a horny-handed son of toil. So I think this does matter. I think it does have resonance because, as Deborah says, if you're going to talk straight-talking, honest politics, and you walk through an empty train carriage and then claim the train is without those TV weasel words, you've been caught red-handed.
Yep. I mean, it's less about authenticity, which a lot of people have been talking about today, I think, or authenticity is a subset of integrity. And, you know, in the polling work that we've done at Britain Thinks, looking at what matters in leadership, the three things that stand out are being a good communicator, having integrity and being decisive. And I think that... the integrity one is where,
Would you have let any of this happen when you were running around with Ed Miliband? I mean, because basically we do all know that you play tricks and you sit down in a train that maybe has got seats, but you're going to make a point about trains. And
absolutely.
Let's face it, his point even Virgin conceded they need more trains on that line. So his bigger point, in a way,
but it's got to have a factual basis. I mean, look, you know, I spent most of the 6 months before the general election up and down the country quite frequently on Virgin trains. One thing to say, of course, is Virgin, if they thought Labour was going to win and they were taking Labour seriously, they wouldn't have released this.
Is the idea that's the one thing we definitely have learned.
The idea that you would pick a fight with the leader of the opposition at any other point, you know, frankly, in 50 years of political history, and that's a really important point, because Labour supporters should realise how unseriously the party is being taken as a serious prospect for power by businesses whose entire business depends on government and regulation.
Hang on. It could just be that they are. I mean, the Corbyn narrative begs to differ with that, Matt. I mean, the Corbyn narrative is, this is a company. We're saying we're going to nationalise the railways. Of course they want to undermine him. If they thought they were going
to do it, OK, then Virgin would be scared and Richard Branson would be tweeting sarcastic texts about him. As to whether or not we'd have done it with Ed, I can tell you that, actually, in Ed's favour, authenticity did matter to him. I remember that people here in the BBC were desperate to try and get, because he spent 18 months of his childhood in Leeds, and he went to primary school there with a woman who's now the rugby league reporter for BBC Yorkshire. And I got so many phone calls from this building saying, oh, please, please, take him to this school. And to be fair to Ed, said, I'm not going to pretend to be an authentic Yorkshireman. I'm not. And I think that, you know, that is what, you know, Corbyn hasn't quite realised. And whatever else it shows the amatism of the operation, because you would have checked what was going on before you released that video that he did.
Absolutely right.
But what about authenticity, Deborah? I mean, do the public really want authentic politicians, or do they want competent politicians? I mean, maybe this doesn't play well on either necessarily.
They do want authentic politicians. They want politicians who authentically believe what they believe. So, you know, if you are authentic, but your views are very different from where the public are, then actually they're not going to vote for you. If they just wanted authenticity, Jeremy Corbyn's, you know, ratings would be screaming, and they're not. You know, they are the worst ratings of any, you know, leader of a political party since polling began. So, no, I don't think so. It's not enough.
All right. Thanks both very much.
I've been getting away with it all.